The sun was sinking low, spilling gold across the dusty street, painting wagon wheels and shuttered windows in a light that felt older than time itself. Folks lingered at the corral, voices sharp with bargaining as a proud black stallion was paraded before them, hooves striking dirt like thunder bottled in flesh. Eli McGraw stood near the rail, his hat low, the weight of silence his only companion. He had thought of bidding, land like his needed strength in muscle and hide, but then a softer sound cut through the commotion, so fragile and fierce it startled the dust in his chest. "Skip the horse," she said softly. "Take me, rancher. I'll be yours for life." The crowd hushed, then broke into cruel laughter. Eli turned his head. There she was, Mara Callahan, her dress worn thin, her cheeks burning, but her back straight as a fence post. She had spoken her shame out loud before men who measured worth in cattle and coin. They mocked her as if she were a fool, but Eli saw in her eyes not madness, but a gamble born of hunger and loneliness, a final act of courage when the world had given her nothing else. Laughter rippled sharper, cutting like spurs. The auctioneer waved her off, embarrassed by the scene, but the townsfolk's whispers were merciless. Women clutched their children closer, muttering she was shameless. Men shook their heads, saying she was ruined, her husband gone, and his debts left behind like chains. And still she stood there, hands trembling but voice steady, as though she had already lost everything except her dignity, and even that the crowd was trying to strip from her. Eli felt a weight press against his ribs, a mix of pity and anger. He remembered hearing her name spoken in saloons, always with a curl of scorn. A laundress now, they said, taking in scraps of work where she could, mocked for what she could not hide, that she was alone in a town that thrived on tearing down the vulnerable. He shifted, his boots grinding dust, torn between silence and a pull he could not quite name. And then he stepped forward. The stallion tossed its head, but Eli's gaze was fixed on Mara. He lifted his hat, his voice calm as riverstone. "I'll hear her out." The street stilled. Gasps broke the silence, followed by mutters and a spit of disgust. Someone called him a fool, another laughed that he'd lost his senses. But Eli did not waver. Mara's eyes flickered wide, and for the first time her strength cracked. She swallowed hard, relief and fear warring across her face. He offered his arm, not as a claim, but as recognition, and in that small, steady act, he gave her back what the crowd had tried to take. Together they walked away, leaving laughter behind like the hollow echo of a bell. Behind the barn, twilight thickened, stars prickling into the sky like shy candles. The scent of hay and leather hung heavy, mingling with the sharpness of dust. Mara's voice trembled when she finally spoke. She hadn't meant to humiliate herself, she said. Hunger and loneliness had driven her words. She had no dowry, no land, no beauty left to bargain with, only loyalty she would give without end. Her hands twisted in her skirt, her breath catching, shame and courage bound together. Eli listened, saying nothing at first. He studied her face, the tired lines, the fierce spark still smoldering in her eyes. Then, slow as a man dragging truth from the bottom of his chest, he spoke of his own emptiness. A wife buried years ago, nights hollowed by silence, land that stretched wide but gave him nothing to share it with. He had strength, yes, and cattle and fences, but no one to remind him he was more than a caretaker of earth. Their words did not ignite fire. They lit something smaller, steadier. An ember. Two souls, worn down by years and whispers, meeting in their rawness, neither saving the other, but recognizing what still survived inside them both. By morning, word spread through town like wildfire. The saloon buzzed with laughter, men jeering that Eli had traded horseflesh for a beggar woman. Mara heard the whispers when she fetched water, each glance a dagger. That night, she stood by the window, the moon cold against her cheek, thinking she should slip away before he paid too heavy a price for her. But Eli came with a lantern, the glow warm against her shadow. "You asked me to skip the horse, Mara," he said quietly. "I did. Don't run now." Her throat tightened. She could not answer, but she stayed. The next evening the corral filled again. Townsfolk gathered not for the horse, but for the spectacle they expected. Would Eli hang his head in shame? Would he bid the stallion and pretend nothing had happened? The black horse pranced, breath streaming in the cooling air. But Eli walked past it, hat in hand, slow as if the earth itself held him steady. Mara stood at the edge, trembling, her heart caught in her throat. And then he took her hand. In that quiet gesture, louder than any gunshot, he made his choice. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Some scoffed, some cursed, but no one dared to laugh. Mara lifted her chin, her shame burning off like fog under morning sun. Together they stepped through the dust, two figures bound not by coin or cattle, but by a courage few could understand. The world may measure worth in acres and silver, but true wealth lies in who dares to stand beside you when the crowd jeers. Sometimes the boldest bargains are struck not in gold, but in grace. And so if you find yourself mocked, cast aside, or weighed down by whispers, remember Mara's plea, that love, loyalty, and dignity are worth more than all the horses in the West. For one soul who chooses you, truly chooses you, is worth more than 1,000 who turn away.